In the red is the proposed Enbridge Gateway pipeline, and what's in the purple is the Trans Mountain pipeline, which probably most of you in the room are quite familiar with, but that's just a closer look at the actual route that the pipeline takes. You also might remember this, of course, the rupture of the pipeline in Burnaby, which had a pretty big impact. It was actually this pipeline rupture which got this guy, Bill Gannon, paying more attention to what was going on in terms of oil in the Vancouver harbour. And this picture you see of him in his window was actually where Bill, sitting in his accounting practice in Cole Harbour, looked out his window and saw a giant tanker one day and was wondering what was going on. And Bill started doing a bunch of research, and he had a really hard time finding any information from the federal government or from the Port Authority or from anybody that he basically talked to. But on his own, he did some research, and one thing that he found that really jumped out at him was in a StatsCan report, where he saw that the first 7 months of 2007, the value of crude oil exports to China surpassed $150 million as China and Canada tested out the logistics of shipping Alberta oil through the Port of Vancouver. That was the first time Bill became aware that there was actually a change that had taken place. There'd been no public process, there'd been no involvement of the general public, there'd been no votes taking place in the legislature or at the city level or the regional level or the federal level, which was a reason for concern, Bill thought, because he saw these big tankers and he started digging around, and he's a risk assessment guy. So first of all, he started looking at, okay, well, how much could this potentially cost us? And his assessment was that a large oil spill in the Vancouver harbour could cost something like $10 to $50 billion in terms of its impact on fishing, tourism, shipping, conventions, seaside businesses, etc. So Bill dug a little further to kind of say, okay, well, how serious is this threat? And this is one of the documents he was able to get his hands on, which shows the limited clearance in the Vancouver harbour. We're talking less than 2 meters clearance for one of these large tankers moving through the Vancouver harbour, which of course has to pass under the secondary rail bridge, and basically can only be done at high tide. Now, to be fair, and I'm sure you'll get some more of this later, there's many tankers that pass at even smaller clearances in other parts of the world. But in terms of ideal conditions, it is reason to be concerned. And he definitely was concerned that it's really not a matter of when, or if, but when an accident occurs when you're dealing with oil. So he started digging a little further to figure out, okay, well, what would happen if there was an oil spill? What would be the guesstimated impact in terms of the tidal currents and winds? And, what big of what size of an area would an oil spill somewhere in Burnaby Inlet in Vancouver Harbour? What would the impact of that be? And as you can see from this slide, basically, within a very short period of time, oil would make its way all up and down the coast. It's just the nature of the way that our coast is composed and the way the tides work. An oil spill in Vancouver Harbour would impact all up and down the Georgia Strait, potentially across the border, and would be a huge problem to clean up. So in terms of how I got involved in this, last year, 2009, I was really actively involved in organizing this International Day for Climate Action. And my concern was really not just about the oil spill, as much as there's a lot of reason to be concerned about that. As a climate activist, I'm quite concerned about the increase in the amount of oil that's being consumed worldwide, and I'm particularly concerned about Canada's role in the world as we face the threat of climate change. So what you're looking at here is a picture from the side of not the Burrard Street Bridge, but the Cambie Street Bridge. And this is a large banner that we made, large chunks of actually in our office. Here's a picture of the letter A from that big banner there, with a group of young people working on it with their hands. And the message was clear: Canadians care, we want climate action now. And this was in the lead up to the Copenhagen Convention. What you see there is a view of the large crowd. There was about 8,000 people on the bridge that day. In fact, it was one of the biggest of these rallies that happened in North America, but it should be noted that there was literally thousands of these events all over the world. It was probably the biggest day of activism for an environmental issue in the history of the planet, all in the lead up to the Copenhagen climate talks, which unfortunately were a horrible failure. The talks really did not reflect actually meeting the needs of what science is telling us in terms of the scale of reduction that's necessary. What you see here on this graph gives you an idea of basically what the maximum 2 degrees rising, that is the sort of maximum amount that's sustainable according to the world's top climate scientists. And what you don't see reflected on this is basically what the UN International Panel on Climate Change is telling us is to stay below 2 degrees Celsius increase. That means that industrialized countries like Canada, virtually need to eliminate the use of fossil fuel by the year 2050. Now that might seem laughable, but it's science. It's not just a matter of opinion, it's what the International Panel on Climate Change, which is the largest allotment of climate scientists that's ever been assembled on the planet, is telling us is necessary. And not only do we need to be thinking about our own emissions, but we need to, I believe, think about what our contribution to the rest of the world is. Are we going to profit from causing climate change, or are we going to play a responsible role in the world? Just this year we've seen drastic increases in extreme weather conditions, things like the flooding in Pakistan, in China, and elsewhere. You can't attribute any one particular extreme weather pattern to climate change, but when you look at the amount of extreme weather that takes place, or the veracity of the storms that take place, all of this really can be linked back to trapping more and more heat on the planet and destabilizing the planet's climate. So as a climate activist, I think it's really not just about polar bears or future generations, but we really need to be thinking about the impact on people right here, right now, on the planet Earth. Canada, unfortunately, has been playing quite a shameful role in all of this. Over and over again, we won Fossil of the Day awards at the Copenhagen Convention. In fact, we won the Fossil of the Year award, which is the international environmental community basically saying, who's playing the most negative role in climate negotiations.
So I attended a climate conference in Poznan, which was the year before the Copenhagen conference. And I've traveled around different places in the world before and always had my big Canadian flag on my backpack. I'm very proud to be a Canadian. And it was very, very strange for me one day when we had to all wear the flags of our country. And a bunch of people came up to me throughout the day and were like, "Oh, you're from Canada? That's too bad." Because literally at these negotiations, we do the exact opposite of what is necessary for this problem to be solved. We have the ability to be leaders against climate change. And we don't. And the reason why, the number one reason why, is because of the tar sands. And I can say that as a Canadian, it hurts me to feel like I can't be proud of my country when I go represent it at things like this.
So I guess the question is, does it really matter who's at fault? We need to make change. I love this picture in part because of Hugo Chavez pointing at everybody else. You're supposed to laugh when I say that. Thank you. The point is that change needs to happen. And many young people in particular are really feeling like the climate is in our hands, that we need to make the difference. If our politicians can't get the job done, we need to do whatever's possible to get the job done. And I've got 3 minutes, it says right here. And in part it is about future generations. This was a cute installation that was done in Copenhagen, trying to show what happens when the temperature rises. This cute little kid was trying to stop this sculpture from melting outside of the convention in Copenhagen. But this really is a serious issue, and the group 350.org, which is a reference to the 350 parts per million, which is supposed to be the safe level of CO2 in the atmosphere. To put in perspective, we're at about 390 parts per million right now, which is why when we talk about reducing emissions, it's something that needs to happen in a large scale, a radical scale, not just in a small incremental scale, but a drastic reduction, not just a slowdown or a reduction in the speed of growth, but an actual reduction in the amount of CO2 in the atmosphere. So there's stuff like this kid holding up this sign happening all over the world. I believe this is in Bangalore. But if you go to the 350.org website, you'll find many, many pictures like this of people, particularly young people all around the world, working to try to do something about climate change. What you see here is an underwater cabinet meeting. This is in the Maldives, Pacific island, little island. And this is actually the government of the Maldives having an underwater cabinet meeting to try to draw attention to the fact that their entire island may be underwater if we don't do something about climate change. So I guess to try to find a place to end this, it's not that environmentalists such as myself and Andrea don't care about jobs. In fact, we do. But we think that if we're not smart about creating the green jobs now, that will create the kind of world that we need in the future, we're going to get left behind. Whether it be through trade negotiations or climate treaties, or just simply the fact that we're getting to a point where oil is becoming more and more expensive to extract, we're not going to be prepared for the challenges of the future, either environmentally or economically, unless we invest in green jobs today.